is, I mean, we're all Oregonians here. We're used to rain, and so people kind of ignore it. But if there's enough of us doing our little part, and if we do it continuously, people can ignore it because it'll be a flood. And so it's going to take a number of us to make a difference. Or using another metaphor, Deb's a big football fan. Well, let's say she's, you know, an all-star, like Marcus Mariota, or I'm saying it wrong, third line brain type, but she can't do it alone. We need a team. So we need a lot of DiveGirl Debs to dive in and help out. And we need our reserves, you know, because like right now I'm busy helping my parents. We need people to kind of follow up when we can't do it. So we don't want to burn anyone out. The person that, Teresa Denham, kind of giving a little history, she poured herself into Lyme advocacy for the state of Oregon for the last 10 years, doing kind of, you know, everything regards trying to get laws changed, trying to, you know, the media, Lyme support for patients. And you just can't do it all. You get burned out after a while. We don't want that to happen to Deb. So I will let her share.
Great, thank you. So, hi everybody. Hi. So, I live in Eugene. First off, I want to ask you, how many Lymies does it take to change a light bulb?
25,000.
It's unlimited because none of us can get off the couch. All we want to do is stare at the burnout bulb. So, you know, Dave's right. I have kind of a compelling story. I think I'm a congenital case. I think I was born with Lyme and Babesia both. And I got injured at work in 1984, and that trauma triggered the onset of my symptoms. And I went about 7 years after that. And if you can't hear me, raise your hand. I'll try to talk louder. You can't hear me, okay? So I got hurt in '84 and went 7 years, then got kicked around from doctor to doctor, and it wasn't until '91 that I went to a rheumatologist and figured out that I had fibromyalgia. Well, all of us knows what that means, that it's really not fibro. It's a series of symptoms of Lyme disease. And so I went 30 years not being diagnosed, and 20 of that here in Oregon. And Dave's right when he talks about me being really pretty angry and upset about this medical process and what we're not doing for patients in Oregon. And when in December 2012, I fell really critically sick, and I spent 16 months in bed. And I'm 6 feet tall, I'm about 170 pounds right now, and I got down to about 110, 120 pounds. I had cardiac problems in the hospital all of 2013, in and out of the hospital. And a friend of mine that figured out that she had Lyme disease says, "Deb, you don't have fibro, you have Lyme." And I'm like, "I've been tested for Lyme." And she says, "No, you need to look at this again. Let's get you Digenics, get you tested." And she was right. We got me Digenics, got me tested. That was inconclusive, as we all know that happens. And so I went down to Northern California to see a Lyme literate MD, and I'll let you figure out who that is. Because I figured my case was complex enough that I needed a real specialist to help me figure it out. And got down there, and they said, "You are definitely a Lyme patient." So they got me started on treatment. We did a second round of Digenics testing and found that I had Babesia also, and quite a few viral loads in addition to that. So I was very sick. Like I said, I nearly died many times. And I've had a spinal fusion in '04, which, you know, we know that degenerative disc disease is related to Lyme as well. And so I've, you know, dealt with all the symptoms, the chronic fatigue, everything. If you look at Pierre Scano's symptoms list, I'm like 98% of them, so I'm a very classic Lyme patient. So once we got me figured out that I am a Lyme patient and got me into treatment, which actually happened May of last year. So this is really new for me to get better. I'm about 15% better right now, which is, for a lot of Lyme's, pretty significant in that short period of time. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I'm doing that you're probably not doing. One of them is bee venom therapy, where you're stinging yourself with honeybees, and the bee venom goes in and it kills about 1,200 pathogens in the body, which is all your viruses, your bacteria, and your parasites. and parasites are candida and yeast and funguses, molds, and it rebuilds the nerve myelin sheath. It resets your hormones. It helps with your cortisol level. A lot of you have POTS because your cortisol level relaxes your arteries and you lose blood pressure and pass out. And that's all related. So my friend Katie from Eugene is also doing me venom, and she's even in remission, and she's finding some enhancement to her symptoms. So I hope you'll spend a little time today talking to her also about this. But to kind of talk a little bit more about me while I was at work. I was part of the HIV/AIDS movement in the late 80s and early 90s, and so if you've ever seen how many of you seen the movie How to Survive a Plague? Wow. 2, okay, 3 with me. I encourage you guys all to look at it. It's called How to Survive a Plague. It's a documentary on the HIV/AIDS epidemic and how the gay community dealt with their diagnosis and treatment protocols. They were fighting patient treatment guidelines with the MD world as well. And they were very controversial, which is what got the media attention, which is what put pressure on the decision makers in the medical community. And I personally am using that as part of my approach to how we're going to treat Lyme in Oregon. So I hope you'll all have a look at that and kind of do a little homework and learn from it. It's a fascinating watch. Yes?
Is that the one they just put out on HBO, or is that a different one? They just put one out on HBO.
I don't have HBO, so I can't speak to that.
I think it's a different one that you're talking about, the newer,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, this was done probably in the mid-90s.
Is it on the internet?
Yes, it's on the internet. It used to be available on like Hulu and Netflix and a number of the outlets. It's a free, you can find it, if you just Google How to Survive a Plague, you'll find it.
Yeah.
It's a great watch.
I think in the mid-90s was the one that was, and the band played on. I think How to Survive a Plague is only in the last few years, 3 or 4 years.
Oh, is it more recent? I thought
Yeah.
it was a little older than that.
And
Okay.
one was kind of done as a made-for-TV special, kind of back when they were promoting awareness on AIDS. So they took a little bit more liberty in how they presented it. It's maybe not completely factual.
Right.
Whereas the band played on is more of a How to Survive a Plague is more of a documentary.
Right, it does document what's going on, and so, anyway, I was part of that movement back then because I saw a lot of my friends that were getting sick and couldn't understand why, and then they couldn't get treatment, and they couldn't get insurance coverage, and that sure all sounds familiar to us, right? So, and then secondarily, I worked for AT&T and ended up being a mobilization coordinator for the Communication Workers of America in the Bay Area, and I handled all the events for the union. And so I've done a lot of big events and protests with that. And so when I figured out the whole Lyme side of things, I'm like, well, I'm already retooled for this. So we're gonna take all this stuff that I know how to do and bring it to the Lyme world. So that's kind of some of my background. I did start, I talked to Teresa Denham when I was really sick with the Oregon Lyme Network. And I encourage you all to go to her site and get to know her. She's a phenomenal resource. She's an animal science major, pre-vet, went to school in Corvallis. She knows this really well, inside and out. She literally saved the life of her family by challenging doctors and digging and learning more about Lyme and getting the whole family treated.
Now, who is that?
Teresa, TheresaDenham.
I don't believe the website's up, or is it up again?
She's redesigned it. She's
Okay.
She tore it down for a little while and redesigned it, and she's still working on that.
Okay.
And I talked to her about 2 years ago, and I said, boy, if I find out I have Lyme, I'm gonna become a Lyme activist. And she's like, yeah, right, whatever. I heard that before. And so then, but I didn't feel like I could really lead the cause, so to speak, without a diagnosis being part of it. But now that I know that I'm part of the community and I'm getting things figured out, I'm just gonna jump in on both feet and try to get things done.
What's the last name?
Denham, Denham. And she runs a the only nonprofit group in Oregon for Lyme disease, which is the Oregon Lyme Network. And her and I are partnering up, along with some of the other Lyme leaders in the support groups like Dave's and over in Bend and down in Southern Oregon and Hood River as well. And we are together going to work on some legislative work this year. So, yes, and so this is kind of part of the reason I'm here is I want to talk about a little bit of that. And Oregon Lyme Network.
Or Oregon Lyme Disease Network, Olden,
Right, thank you.
OLDN.
Lyme Disease Network.
Right.
You may, I don't, like Deb's saying, I don't know if the website is up, so you might have to go to what, I forget what it's called, something, the archives type thing, and you can bring up the old site.
Right. And you're welcome to get a hold of me if you can't find it. I'll happily help you find it. But we're gonna get some things done here, and it may take us a couple, 3 years to do it, but we're gonna get some things done. Yes.
You mentioned doing something with the legislature. Are you going to have like a group? I mean, I'd like to sign up to help with that, so.
That's great. We're gonna need a lot of help.
So are you gonna have like a registration area that you can, or how are you going to get it out to us, that what you're working on?
I have an email for my group, which is, if you want to write it down, it's Lyme Disease Eugene OR at gmail.com.
I think I got that one.
Right. And if you want to get on my broadcast list, please send me an email. You can also contact me through Dave. And
Eugene.com.
Lyme Disease Eugene OR at gmail.com.
And you're on Facebook.
And I'm on Facebook, thank you. I have a couple groups on Facebook where we talk about this too. So, and by the way, a couple things just real quick. When I tell you, like, there's things that I'm doing and I'm finding are working for me, these are things that I have elected to do, and you all are gonna make your own informed consent about what therapies you're gonna choose. So, I'm not a medical provider, I'm not licensed to practice medicine in the state of Oregon, but I am a Lyme patient, and I'm a Lyme activist patient, and I'm more than willing to share what is working for me and what is helping me, and if that helps you, that's terrific. But I don't want anybody to think that I have any medical qualifications, because other than an animal science degree, I don't. But I think, as we all know, the veterinary world has pretty big, their arms around this a little better than I think the MD world does. So we're gonna talk, Dave talked a little bit about my experience last year in dealing with the infectious disease unit in Eugene out at Sacred Heart Hospital. And I'm kind of in their blacklist right now, and because I'm kind of a rebel. And I recorded a phone call with them. My doctor kept, I kept prompting them saying, show me the path for treatment. And they kept hemming and hawing around, like, oh, do this referral, go do that referral, and they sent me over to that referral, and I'd already been to see one ID doc in early 13, who poo-pooed IGenics and said, no, you don't have Babesia, that's hormones, and all these other things going on, and so we had another ID doc that was in the clinic, and I'm like, I want to go see them, so I called, and I'm going to play a recording for you real quick, and I want to just see what you guys think about this. Bear with me a minute, my library.
Outside of the area, but there's nobody that I know of in Lake County that currently treats for Lyme disease.
So, I mean, you guys are the PeaceHealth office, medical office for infectious diseases, right?
Correct.
And so, I guess I don't understand. I have infections, and you're telling me that on Lyme disease, there's no.
Our doctors don't treat for Lyme disease here. That's just their choice. They don't have any current treatment for it, so they don't treat for it.
Do they?
The CDC doesn't recognize it. But, I mean, there's other doctors that do have ways that they feel like they can treat it, but here it's not something we want to take on and treating Lyme disease. That's something we practice here.
You just said the CDC doesn't acknowledge Lyme disease?
There's no diagnosis code for Lyme disease. They recognize it as like having conditions or symptoms that can be treated for Lyme disease.
Well, they found Lyme disease spirochetes. They've done DNA testing of this.
It's just that our specific office does not treat anybody or see anybody for Lyme disease.
So that's kind of
That's just the
the
doctor's preference.
so that's a kind of the F word for your office. So if somebody, has that underlying infection, that's your red flag that you won't deal with us.
It's because we don't currently have anything that we believe is that we can treat you with. So that's why we don't treat it here. That's the doctor's choice.
Well, but you're part of the Trillium Health Plan, which is part of OHP, Oregon Health Plan, and Medicare.
What I'm saying, we don't treat it here. So you would come here, we would tell you we couldn't treat you for it, and then we wouldn't be able to do anything for you.
So is this a PeaceHealth policy?
It's just that what the infectious disease doctors have decided they currently don't treat for hepatitis, for Lyme disease.
Huh. So you're talking about the Infectious Disease Society of America, IDSA.
I'm talking about just the infectious disease department here. The doctors have all decided they don't treat Lyme disease.
Wow. Do they treat Babesia?
I've never seen anybody here for Babesia, no.
Okay, well, I have Babesia, which is a malaria-like parasite.
I'll pull up your referral because it looks like Dr. Ormisher has seen you previously in the past. And at that time, she said there was nothing.
So I'll just pause it there. You guys get the gist. The gist is that we're not going to treat Lyme in Oregon. And the reason for this, obviously, is because the Oregon Medical Board is kind of ruled by Dr. Gilbert and OHSU, and they like to, we have a really bad policy nationwide, but we've also got what I call a biofilm over the state. I initially called it a biodome, but I think a biofilm is much more appropriate. And as you know, we have much more restrictive, policy here. And Oregon is a test state for so many political and ballot initiatives. We just saw that Dr. Broner Soap tried to get GMO legislation passed here. They spent $2 million on it. Outside GMO, people came in with about $55 million and, lost within about 800 votes. So we've all seen that. I really think that Lyme disease is the catalyst that we could change a lot of the country if we could flip Oregon. And so it's kind of my objective that we're going to look at Connecticut and New York, some of the legislation that they've done there to protect medical doctors, and try to get some of that initiated. Now, we may not get it the first round. We might have to wait, we might have to keep going back and talking. But I can tell you that I've sat down extensively with Teresa Denham. We worked over Thanksgiving about 6 days on this, and we talked it through. And she knows how to get this done. She has political influence. She has the right connections. But it's critical that we're all rowing in the same direction. So that once we come to you guys and say, here's what we're going to do, that's kind of not the time for the good idea fairy to get involved. Okay? So, yes.
Have you ever looked into Wisconsin, what they're doing? Because I heard that they accept, Lyme is accepted insurance in Wisconsin, the only state in the union.
Well, that's a good idea. We've talked to ILADS and we've talked to NADCAP Lyme, and we've looked, and we know what's going on here in Oregon, and so with that kind of perspective in play, we're trying to look at, what's the best legislation that we can try to go ask for, and
Would that be a way, both sides of my family are from Wisconsin. I'd be more than willing to look into that and help you get, you
absolutely.
talk about emulating other successful campaigns, and to me,
Right.
being covered by insurance, that's huge. So whatever they're doing in Wisconsin is somewhat right.
Right, exactly, yes.
I want to share something that's exciting,
Okay.
if I may. I have a brother who was diagnosed with Lyme disease in the 90s. He has chronic Lyme, and he's being given medical care through the Veterans Administration. I was taking him up to Walla Walla, this is over the last 3 or 4 years, to the clinics up there. And when he would mention, I have borreliosis, it was just like this, over the top of his head. Here, about a year and a half ago, a friend told me that I could take him into the emergency room at OSHU. You're laughing, yes. Well, anyway, I took him into the emergency room at OSHU. Not only did they ignore him, but he should have been covered by the Veterans Medical, and they sent him a bill. Now, my husband also has medical care through the Veterans. And since I have Lyme, I've watched him, and I don't know that he does, but I'd like to have him tested. So he had an appointment here a week ago for his annual physical. And in the course of the physical, I said, it was a PA who saw him, I said, you know, I'm going to ask you something. I kind of know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask anyway. I said, is there any way I can get a blood draw to send to this lab down in California? Oh yes, she said. I didn't tell her who the lab was or anything. So she put an order on his file, and here this last week he went in, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday, I believe. He went into the lab up at the Debs hospital to get his regular lab work done. Well, the request for the blood draw that I wanted was separate from the regular lab. I sat downstairs, he went up to the second floor for his appointment. He came down, he said, oh, they did a draw and they're sending it to IGenics. Do you get the point? I was totally surprised and almost in shock after years of trying to get any acknowledgement whatsoever. I didn't say anything, and he didn't say anything about who the lab was. But they sent his blood sample down to IGenics, and I'm to talk to IGenics on Monday. But I think that might be exciting.
Let's go with that. So I kind of launched a campaign here, and these are some of the signages from the campaign. I laid some on the tables if you guys want to kind of read along and look at it. Essentially, these are the elements that we want to ask for. That we want protective measures for MDs to operate freely in Oregon with medical insurance reimbursement. We want to erase the obstacles, political and in terms of treating patients. We want to establish a tick surveillance program. Now, we know that the state of Oregon hasn't done a surveillance program since 1998. And personally, I think that's kind of risky for everybody.
What's the surveillance program?
Well, it's where you go out and we'll do tick sweeps, where we'll collect ticks with a dry cloth, and then we'll send them in probably to IGenics or another lab for testing and analysis to see what they're carrying. And Teresa's got some really great resources for how to do that also. We're going to need some fundraising to help with it. We're going to try to get some fundraising from the state as well. But I mean, it's been 16, 17 years since the state of Oregon really has any idea what's going on in terms of this infectious agents here in the state. We look at the CAPC website, which is a veterinary reporting website where every time a dog is tested for Lyme or Ehrlichia or Anaplasma, it gets reported. Now, when I look at Hood River, we saw last year, I think it's 1 in 8 dogs in Hood River tested positive for Lyme disease. This is not small numbers. These are really high, and these are companion animals that are going into the household that are infecting children and other family members and other pets, and this is serious. We look down in Grants Pass where they have another cluster of patients, and it's about 1 to 17 to 1 to 25 dogs are positive down there. Look at Lane County where I'm from, it's 1 in 575. Now, to me, that's a sign that we have a reporting problem in Lane County. So,
And are there any statistics on, besides the Borrelia, the other co-infections?
there is.
For
There's
dogs?
Yes, Anaplasma and Ehrlichia are both reported. But that's just those 3 is the primary reporting that they do. It's a great website. You can go online. It's CAPC is it's a veterinary reporting, and I think it's probably the purest reporting that we can find in Oregon right now.
And that's all you put in the CAPC?
Right, CAPC. And it's statewide that, well, actually, it's not just statewide, it's countrywide. So you can look at counties throughout the entire country, state by state. And you just click on like the Oregon map, for example, and then you can click on your county to find out what's going on in your county. You can go back a couple of years, I think they have 12, 13, or 14 years on there, so there's some really good data to look at. But we definitely have Lyme in Oregon, so this conversation of, well, we don't have any Lyme in Oregon, or this whole somewhat plausible argument that the western fence lizard gives us a little bit less infection rate, doesn't really hold water with me. People are getting infected. And now that we think that Lyme is an STD, how many people have read that report? Excellent, good. You know, there's that possibility, and then there's the whole congenital factor. The fact that we got people traveling all over the world right now, and they could be spreading this and we don't know. And with 300 types of Lyme bacteria, testing for 5 or 6 is not adequate for us. So I think that, you know, doing a tick sweep in the state is important. We have a lot of visitors that come here in the summertime, and I think it's our duty to protect those people of what we have as known risks. And so that's one of the things on here that we want to look at. I also want to see patient advocates through probably a state program where an advocate can be assigned to a Lyme patient that is cognitively challenged, like me right now trying to say that. I mean, I don't know, like when I was trying to get my disability and I was in bed sick for 16 months, I needed an advocate. I needed somebody to step up and be the cheerleader for Deb and to make sure that my welfare was looked after. And I think it's really important that we do that. Jesse, you can move that over out of your face.
It's fine,
Okay, so,
thank you.
So I think that's really important that we look at that as part of our ask. We do want to see, I'd like to see some legal help for the medical appeals process for insurance denials. I think insurance companies are doing denials right and left for not the right reasons. I think if we started challenging them legally, then Gilbert's not going to be in all those proceedings at the same time. I want to see us post some road and trailhead signage for awareness for visitors on tick awareness. I want to see some public Lyme awareness campaigns. I want May proclaimed as Lyme Disease Awareness Month statewide. And I want to see Lyme awareness taught in all the grade schools. So the first week of school, kids learn about this. And they learn how to identify a bullseye rash and ticks. And if they have a problem, to go tell a parent or a teacher. And we got to make kids smart about this. We can't let our children get infected with this junk and then get sick and keep this going. We see this in a lot of other states right now on the East Coast that they have tick awareness programs in the schools, and there's no reason Oregon can't do it too. So those are some of the things that I want us to do. I'm calling this our Operation Patient Emergence. I want us to take Lyme out of the closet and talk about it openly, talk about it with all our family and our friends. And I know it's difficult to talk about, and they're probably weary from hearing it. But you also, we kind of have a duty because we have the knowledge now, and we're the leaders in this cause. And, you know, you can't dominate a conversation, but you can sure as heck say, I would be remiss if I didn't give you some information about Lyme disease. And talk about it for about 5 or 10 minutes and let it go. So I do have, this is a handout that I put together and produced. There's copies of it on the back here. It's, I started doing Saturday market things and talking to people, just the general public about Lyme disease, and of course they're responsible